topic this morning is an opportune time. This is an opportune time. And as I sat and tried to figure out, well, what is it that you say during the 40 days of Lent? What is it that you preach so that people can feel inspired and renewed and committed to this thing called salvation? What is it that you would have for me to share with the people of God? And the Lord said, well, you haven't spent much time in the New Testament. Go on over to the New Testament. He said, you spent a lot of time in the Old Testament. Let these people know that you have another section to your Bible as well. And I was like, okay, Lord, okay. So I went and I picked Luke chapter 4, 1 to 13. And as I read through it over and over, I began to think about what it was that it was really saying and what it was that we're really going through with this season of Lent, and how in this season of Lent, as we go through these next several weeks, how what God is really doing is inviting us into the wilderness with him. It lets us know early on that Jesus was taken by the Spirit into the wilderness. And so our spirits, as we hunger and thirst after God and his righteousness, it should draw us into the wilderness as well. And when I thought about the wilderness, I remembered, the wilderness, that's not really fun. It's got dry, dirty soil. Y'all know how I feel about dirt and bugs and such. And in the wilderness, some things growing wild at times, that some of them are good for you and some of them can hinder you. The wilderness is kind of a place of you just out there exposed to the elements, going through whatever it is that is happening. You have to deal with it. And so while Jesus was in the wilderness, he was actually faced with temptation. And so as I thought about that, and I was like, well, Lord, if you're drawing us into the wilderness to follow after you, will we too be tempted? And the Lord was like, sweetie, you live in the wilderness all the time. You're tempted on a daily basis. Things come in and out of your life, in and out of your mind, in and out of your line of sight. Things just simply that will tempt you and try to get you to go off course. And so as I thought about that and realized that, yes, what we kind of do face on a daily basis is just trying to maneuver through the minutia of the wilderness that we call life. And so while we're trying to do that, as we're trying to go through that and really realize what happens in the wilderness, 3 times the devil came to Jesus and tried to offer him things that were already his. He told him, look, take this stone, make some bread, because I know you're hungry. You can have something to eat. Go ahead and do it. As though Jesus hadn't already taken 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread and fed all that he needed to. See, the devil tried to tempt him with something that was actually already within him, something that he had the power to do at any point in time. But Jesus realized, look, it's not about me. It's about what God has called me to do. And so then the devil went a little bit more, and he was like, look at all of this that you can have. This whole world, all these kingdoms, you can be ruled over all of them. I'll give you authority over it. I can let you have that. As though Jesus was already not the Son of Man. The Son of God. And had authority over everything anyway. He didn't need the devil to give him the authority. He had it anyway. And then the last time, I love this last one, because it's so ludicrous. It just kind of make you stop and go, wow, he's not even real bright. Devil looked at my man, and he said, look, throw yourself down from this rock. Just go on, jump to your death. Just see what will happen if you go over the cliff. Just throw all safety out the door. Go on and try to bungee jump without the cord. I'll send some angels to take care of you. And at this point, Jesus is sitting there, and he's like, this man must be crazy. I give life, and I give it abundantly. And you want me to attempt to take my own? And so as I thought about that and how that actually impacts our lives, I realized that while we're going through life, frequently we'll be tempted with things. And a lot of times the things that we're tempted with are things that we already have control over. A lot of times the things that we're tempted with are things that we're already involved in. A lot of times the things that we're tempted with are the things that we've already been working in and working through. I mean, think about it. As someone who's active in the church, you've heard about people who come into the church and get a big head and want to take control over everything. But they were already working in the church. They didn't have to get a big head. They just had to keep working in the church. You've seen people at work on their jobs trying to, lord it over everybody that they make the most money because they're the supervisor. Well, you don't have to throw that in folks' face. They already know you're the supervisor. You got to make the hard decisions. You got to sign the evaluations. You got to okay the overtime. So a lot of times the things that tempt us when we're out in the store and we see that coat that costs $300, $400, $500, $600, and we want to buy it so that we can have somebody look at us and go, ooh, that's mighty nice. As if they were going to pay the bill just because they said it was mighty nice. We don't have to let seeking after that type of power and influence over people take over our lives, because we have access to any coat that we want anyway. We were already at the mall to get a coat. But the beauty of it, as Jesus is going through this, he's saying, look, I don't have to do any of these things. I don't have to follow after anything that the devil is trying to throw in my way. I don't have to stoop down. I don't have to lean over. I don't have to fall prey to any of it, because all of it's mine anyway. And I realize that in our own lives, it's already ours anyway. God has already told us, it's yours. I'm giving all of it to you. But what Jesus did realize while he was in the wilderness for those 40 days was that he had to lean into what God had spoken to him. He had to be willing to go through the temptation. He had to be willing to go through the hunger. He had to be willing to just deal with what it was out there in the wilderness. And so that's what God requires us to do. Lean into Christ while we're in the wilderness. What is it that we're supposed to do while we're in the wilderness? I remember when I was younger, and they would have all these fasts in church, and you would see people on Sunday morning, and you'd ask them how they were doing, and they was like, oh, I'm out here fasting for Jesus. Girl, I'm so hungry, I don't know what to do. I'm just, I hope this comes to pass soon because I'm really hungry. And I just always used to think, well, if everybody in the church is fasting, because I grew up in the church where everybody in the church would be fasting, do we all have to keep telling each other that we're hungry? Aren't we all hungry? And what I realized as I got older was that, no, I don't need to ask you or tell you I'm hungry if I'm fasting. Because if you're fasting with me, you know what hunger is. But what am I doing instead of the hunger? You know, what Jesus calls us to do into Lent, one of the reasons he calls us is to lean into something that's unlike ourselves, lean into a situation that is different from ours. What I came to learn and to realize is that during the period of Lent, we have the opportunity to not just sit around and complain because we don't drink Diet Coke, but we have the opportunity to do some additional work, some different work that we didn't always seek to do. We could actually find a cause, if it were. We could find a reason that we needed to lean more and depend more on Christ if we actually looked for it. That's what Jesus did. As he went through this 40 days in the wilderness, what he said was, I'm going to pray fervently. And so what he did was just constantly had a conversation with his Father. He constantly talked to him about what was going on. He constantly asked him, what would you have me to do? He constantly let him know what was happening all around him. He just wanted to be in the presence of the Lord. And so he spent 40 days simply just talking and praying. And during that, God began to tell him, look, I've got something more for you to do. I've got something greater for you to do. Let me encourage you. Let me motivate you. Let me let you know that you won't walk through this next phase of life by yourself. You won't have to go through this and it feel as difficult and as isolating and as lonely as it has been, because I'll be right there with you. And so that's what we're supposed to actually do during Lent. Spend more time with the Lord, more time in his presence, more time in the word, so we can find out what it is that thus saith the Lord. It may be that God is calling Milford Mill United Methodist Church to go deeper into ministry. He may say he has a hunger for us to reach more into the community. He has a desire for us to help out those who are challenged by homelessness, or challenged by poverty, or challenged with miseducation, or challenged by joblessness, or challenged with, I don't know, anything. If you can come up with it, it may be that the Lord is calling us into that. And so what we do during Lent is simply agree to follow after God, to follow after the example that Jesus set, so that we can find and hear what the Lord is calling for us to do. Now, I know that that's not something where people get excited about, because what you like is an exciting word, something where you can go, ooh, Lord, I know that was a good one. Somebody on Zoom right now was going, yup, I haven't been able to wave my hand not once. You can still wave your hand at what I'm saying, because wave your hand simply means that you agree, that you understand what I'm talking about. But what I want you to get this morning is that God has called us simply into his presence. And he says, I want you to set aside these 40 days to draw closer to me. Don't worry about what your friend is doing. Don't worry about what your neighbor is doing. Don't worry about how it might look to the outside world, but draw closer unto me. Come on and let me carry your burdens. Come talk to me about the things that break your heart. Come let me know what it is that troubles you at night. What's that thing that keeps you awake? What's that thing that won't let you loose? What's that thing that's been troubling you, just been gnawing at you just a little bit, but it never quite goes away? Doesn't anybody have something that's just always right there? God is always talking, always speaking, and it's always right there. God is saying, lean into that thing. Talk to me about it so I can walk with you through it. God's been trying to birth something in us for quite some time, and we keep turning from it and keep walking in a different direction and keep acting like because it wasn't something big and huge that would make the news, that maybe it wasn't important. Some of the most important things that we do in life don't make the news. Nobody hears about them. Nobody gets excited about them, except for the people that we've touched and we've blessed, who've come to really know, wait a minute, there's something about the name of Jesus. There's just something that makes it better than it was before. And as long as I keep following after what Jesus said, if I keep leaning into what God has called me to do, if I keep talking and trying to have this relationship, if I keep walking around trying to understand what he's really called me in to do, maybe, just maybe, this wilderness that I've been calling life won't seem so wild and barren and crazy and isolating and just plain long ludicrous. Anybody ever look at the news and just go, my God, this is just ludicrous? But after a while, you keep leaning and depending on the Lord, and he just keeps working and fixing things. And we keep listening for God's voice, doing what God says, and then things just get a little bit better. I remember talking to Sister Janice. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it's what I do. And she was talking about the roof and how we had been working on the roof before I got here, and how I believe you said it was some $60,000 for the 2 roofs that we had paid for this year. And I was thinking, well, isn't that just marvelous? And then she said, I hate to go back and ask them for money for the bathrooms. And because I grew up differently than Janice, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if they can pay $60,000 to get the roofs leaking, certainly they can pay $30,000 for some bathrooms. I just felt in my spirit, well, we can go on and get these bathrooms done. We're not going to table it. We're not going to put it to the side. We're just going to go collect the money for it. And I'm sure she's sitting there looking at me right now going, I knew she was crazy. But I declare, the way my thinking works, the way I believe in God, if God blessed us to fix 2 roofs for $60,000, surely we can fix 2 bathrooms. We don't have to worry about how people will come in and be able to come through the sanctuary. If we spent the next 40 days in prayer talking about, Lord, how are we going to do the bathrooms? When it was over, Sister Janice would be giving a report saying, well, the people will be coming out on Monday, and I've already got the estimates. That's how it works, don't you think, Sister Janice? All right. I got a thumbs up. That's how it works. We've got to keep leaning into what God has called us to do. We've got to keep listening for how God is speaking to us. And we've got to be willing to move into action while it's done. What I do know about Jesus is he didn't just sit on a rock for 40 days in the wilderness. He was moving and doing stuff the whole time. And while we're spending this time in Lent talking to the Lord, listening to the Lord, seeking the Lord, let's keep moving in action. Let's keep going forward in the path that God has set us on. Let's keep moving in the direction with the trajectory that God has called for us. It's not just an isolated event. It's not just a one-time event. It's a lifestyle that we've been called to. We're supposed to do it over and over and over again. You don't just eat one meal and be like, that's it, I'm good for life. You eat 3, 4, 5 times a day. But every time I eat, I thank God for something to eat. Every time I wake up, I thank God that I'm awoke today. Every time I get in the car and reach where I'm meant to be, thank God that nothing happened to me. And when I get back home, thank God I made it safely. See, if we spend all day, every day, just leaning into and talking to the Lord, not only does he make the day go smoother, but he allows us to function and operate in the way in which he's called us. So while we go through this journey of Lent, while we embark on this time in the wilderness, let's not look at it as trying to get through these next 40 days. Let's look at it as 40 days of practice of what our future will be. Amen? Amen. Amen.